Time to time, we need a break. I need a break from writing. And how do you use the break? As far as I'm concerned, there is, of course, natural breaks coming in when I have something to do with, say, glyphosate, or when I have to go out to watch birds or stuff. But when I'm sitting at my desk and I'm writing, preparing a couple of books, and one of them is, let's say, this book of essays. One of the ways is to watch the news for a little while. It has become difficult to get balanced news these days. I know that. But anyway, watch the news, make some comments, put something on Facebook, and also read back what you have written, make a little correction here and there, and add some more ideas in your mind before you get back to typing. So one of the things I started writing today, a new section 12 of this particular chapter, is about mainstream media and free press, how we do not have free press anymore. That's different from in my childhood days. We are aware of it for a long time, that the press has become captured by a few media corporations, and it's no more as varied as it used to be. And in other words, free press has more or less died. I became aware of it while I was even living in Hong Kong several decades ago, and also more so when I moved to USA, and I became convinced when I finally migrated to Canada. So here is something I wrote, and I thought I'll just read it just to break the monotony. Let me read what I wrote. Probably I'll not like some of the stuff I wrote, and then maybe I'll go back and start cleaning that up and so on. So, RIP Free Press, rest in peace Free Press, hail social media. Social media is not a replacement for free press, but it serves its purpose in pointing towards various other sources here and there. So, free press is in intensive care. That's the synopsis of the chapter. I might change it later on. Number one, I did not imagine that free press would stop being a truth teller. Number two, I did not imagine Western media will start manufacturing fake news. I thought this only happened in Soviet Union and other communist nations of the past. But the wheel has turned half circle, black has become dotted, and white has gone gray. Welcome to the age of media hubris and propaganda. However, West is not the only place where truth and rational thinking are victims. It's happening everywhere, almost everywhere, at least in the English media, which I can read, or in my few other languages from India that I can read. It's happening. So, what did I write so far? I used to follow a lot of different news sources, such as Financial Times, The New Yorker, Newsweek, New York Times, BBC, Washington Post, Truthdig, Democracy Now!, Fox News, and Mother Jones. Also Times of India, The Guardian, Al Jazeera, South China Morning Post, Deutsche Welle Radio in German, from Germany in English, Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, being a few. And I consider some outlets such as Fox News or Wall Street Journal to represent conservative and pro-business views, and some, such as Washington Post, to cater to the left-leaning progressives, a group in which I considered myself to be. However, when you get confused by the news and suspect that the articles themselves might be biased, you might start questioning your preconceived notions about news and media. For example, liberal left-leaning political groups were also pro-big business and anti-people. I did not know that initially. I would not have thought that initially, but I begin to realize it little by little. Left merges with right, and the right envelops both the missing left and the ultra-right. Free press begins to look less and less free. However, that was then. It took me a while to figure out that mainstream media has, over the decades, stopped pushing independent fact-finding informations covering all points of view and has slowly morphed into a new kind of Western near-fascist corporate agenda at mind control. I used to think these were fake conspiracy theories. I do not think that anymore. So, when I get up and prepare my morning coffee, there is no proverbial morning paper to read through. Newspaper is dead. For multiple reasons, internet has become the pathway to news. But filtering good news from rubbish has gotten increasingly difficult even on internet. I used to think of myself as a sort of leftist leaning progressive. I read news from both sides of the aisle to keep myself abreast on the goings on in this world. But lately, I stopped being a regular left leaning liberal and stopped taking most of the media, right and left wing, seriously. Late delivery. The first to go from my daily news source was a printed newspaper that used to be delivered at my door. The initial problem was the delivery time. I would have liked it to arrive at 6 a.m. so I could read it while having my morning coffee and before I got into my car to go to office, which would be at about 7:30. Instead, it arrived at around 8 a.m. and I would get to see it after 6 p.m. when I got back home. That sucked. Also, using the time while on the road to office was a good place to catch up on things. So the car radio provided a better avenue, except that the local FM channels were not known to be very good at delivering world news, though they were great at providing local traffic news as well as the weather. Podcasts and Amy Goodman. Also, by this time, iPods had arrived, through which I could download huge number of news and editorial podcasts, which could be played through the car's music system and listened to while driving to work, instead of incessant loud music, most of whose lyrics were not interesting. So listening to podcasts became a big part of my assimilation of world news. That was when I began to listen to podcasts such as Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! Seriously. Before the age of iPods, I was not too familiar with Amy Goodman's channel, having seen her on TV only a few times and read about her sparingly. Also, by then, I was weaning myself away from the television set. I disliked watching news on the TV because it was manufactured media hype. So, listening to Democracy Now! While driving to work was a great tonic. It also saved me from being frustrated at slow traffic. It also gave you pause to drink your coffee and ponder. It was all good, and it helped wean me away from newspapers and TV channels. Of course, all this was done before I started getting first a bit tired and then a bit disenchanted with Amy Goodman and Democracy Now! Because of what I considered a neoliberal bias of some sort, especially when coming to reporting, let's say, on the 2016 US election or what appeared to be tilted and hysterical opposition to Trump, as well as the true goings on in the Middle East and the long drawn out Syrian conflict. But I'm getting ahead of the story here. Pricing itself out of existence. The second problem with newspaper was that its astronomical cost. As avenue of online free news increased, subscription to printed newspapers decreased. Along with it, the break-even cost of newspapers in a shrinking market increased, making it even less attractive to potential subscribers. Meanwhile, major newspapers around the world started offering online version free of charge for a while. Thus, it was now possible to read Washington Post or the Telegraph and even the New Yorker online, and more often than not, free of charge. And so the reading goes, and by the time you have spent 5-10 minutes, now you're refreshed and ready to go back and keep pounding the keyboard for a few more paragraphs of the problem with gathering good news these days. I have not yet written about the one thing I really disliked about printed newspaper is the huge volume of advertisements. For every page of real news, there were 10, 12 pages of advertisement after advertisement for this goods and that goods and cars and clothes, and it is just mind-boggling how they try to, hook you into just spending last bit of cents you have into buying some rubbish all the time, because it's a new season, it's a new fashion. Last year's sweaters should not be any good, and those shoes you bought last year, even if they're in perfect condition, they should be no good, and blah blah blah. So the whole thing is absolutely, I found it disgusting to have to go through so much of wasted paper on such rubbish. This is one thing I've not written about, but yeah, it's a good time now to write about it. I mean, the one thing that I've come to seriously dislike about news outlets is the amount of advertisements that I have to watch or listen to just to get some useful news. I find the whole thing both bizarre, irritating, and an undesirable disease of the capitalist system. More than a disease, it is an epidemic.